Welcome back to Story Deep Dive with Rachel and Dana. This is a podcast where two book coaches, editors, and besties discuss books not as readers but as writers to draw inspiration from great books and have lots of laughs along the way. Today is our final week of discussion on Broken Harbor by Catherine Cowles. So we're really going to be focusing on kind of some of our key takeaways from this book and our preceding 3 weeks of discussion. But before we dive into that, we have this kind of turned into like a tradition now that on our last week of the whatever book we're studying, we announce our next book because we are very generously giving you 1 week to buy the book and read it in time for our next week's episode. You're very welcome. And our next pick for next month is going to be a crossover pick that sort of layers in Dana's sort of genres and my genres. And Dana, you're the one who actually introduced me to this particular book. Do you want to kind of tell us what it is and who the author is, and maybe even like what sort of inspired you to pick it as our crossover pick?
Listen, y'all, she be putting me on the spot because of all of the things. And I'm just like, I needed a book for the slot. Okay.
I gave you a very long list also. Could you tell me this, and also this, please?
Say that was not in the notes, ma'am. Okay. So the book selection is Louisiana Longshot by Jana DeLeon. And I could be saying that wrong. But why I picked it. First of all, I think it's a hoot. And as we get ready for the books that we have coming up, mixing up the flavor is helpful. It's also a book that I feel like we haven't fully had yet as a cozy mystery. And this is not your traditional cozy mystery, right? Because a lot of them are amateur sleuths. And she is a CIA agent.
Yeah.
Which is a little bit on the different side, right? I mean, she's amateurish in her dealing with small town politics and small town shenanigans. And so one of the reasons why I am finding that I really like looking at cozy mysteries, number one, because I am always on the hunt for cozy mysteries that I actually feel excited about finishing. I don't know why. It's a personal thing, I know, because there are a lot of them, but they don't always make me want to read another book, right? Yeah. To keep reading. And so that has sent me on a quest. And I also have several clients who write cozy mysteries, and I find myself reading and just trying to find, like, what is the thing that makes you want to keep reading? Is it the same as what I look for in a romance? And so that's number one. Number two, I thought it was interesting that she was a CIA agent. And a lot of times in cozy mysteries, you find that they're a baker, they're a shopkeeper, or they're restoring something. And again, I haven't read every single cozy mystery, but that is very, very, very common.
For sure.
And the dynamic of the ladies that are in the book, I thought is very interesting.
Yeah.
The last thing that I find that is just not a rule of thumb, but it's something that is common to me when it comes to cozy mystery is that it is a great way to study character development. You have a story that, because you have a single protagonist most of the time, that you are coming back to those people, and you have to build those people in such a way that they are growing over many books, because cozy mysteries can go on forever.
Yeah.
But also being interesting enough to be contained in a single book. And so I'm sure this won't be my last cozy mystery, because I like it for that reason. I think it's a great thing for a lot of my clients who are romance writers to sort of take in as well, because the heart of our stories is character change. And it just has some laughs where you just find yourself just pulled in. And who doesn't want a book that makes you laugh at adults doing crazy stuff? So those are some of the reasons why I picked it. And the last thing, I think is the last thing for all. It was recommended by one of my clients, and she was so right. She was just like, Dana, I think you would love this. And she writes inspirational romance, but she loves cozy. So she's always telling me about books because she knows I'm trying to find the series that I just love. And I think I actually have. But and so that's another thing. So when a client points it out, or it's something that I think has made them bring it to my attention, I try my best to read it and see, okay, yeah, this is, and this particular one, it does all of those things while at the same time not being in alignment with what you always think, but it has the heart and sort of the rhythm and the undercurrent that you expect, while having a protagonist that's a little bit different. But then the journey overall, is the same.
Yeah. Well, and I think it is interesting because you're right. Like traditionally, cozy mysteries are amateur sleuths, right? And we've had um Janet Ivanovich, One for the Money was like cozy-ish,
Ish.
mystery-ish. It was both like ish of those things. Whereas this one really is like an act, like a full cozy mystery. But it's kind of cool because it does. I see some of the overlaps, right, that it has with now Janet Ivanovich. One for the Money came out uh probably what, like a decade or two before Louisiana Longshot did, because Louisiana Longshot was middle 2000s, and I think One for the Money was either late 90s or very early 2000s.
Yeah, it was. I think it was late because, yeah. Fun fact, I think I said that during the episode when we did it. I read that when I was pregnant with Kiara. So
Yeah, that's right,
late
that's right.
2000, like early 2000s. But that would have been already mass and is traditionally published. And mass press books didn't get released until at least 18 months to 2 years
Yeah,
then after a hardback. So I'm
yeah.
thinking late 90s.
Yeah, I think you're right. So it's kind of interesting to be able to like compare and contrast the way that aspects of the genre have developed since then.
Hmm.
And one of the things that cozies are so good for is like really leaning into comedy. And again, that really like part of that is so helpful for the tone that you want of a cozy, right? Because we're always cozy mysteries. Sometimes cozy mysteries will be about, oh, we're looking for like a missing thing or we're it's not always murder, but it is frequently murder. And so being able to lean into sort of outrageous small town environments, go heavy on the shenanigans, that's a part of how cozy mysteries sort of diffuse the tonal tension of the fact that like a man is dead. For God's sake, somebody died,
Bodies dropping. Right.
exactly. Because I think she does a really good job of like leaning into that facet of cozy, which is zany cast of characters. And like, because when we almost universally, when we write about small towns, they're weird because small towns are weird. And so like we kind of really like lead into like what is uniquely weird about individual small towns. Because if you've ever lived in a small town for a long period of time, or if you came from a small town, you learn very quickly that they have their own like little weird like things, like little cultural things that are like
Culture.
common
Hmm.
to a small town. And so of course when we do a cozy mystery, normally we lean like really hard into those and we kind of exaggerate them, make them a little bit larger than life. So yeah, so this is a fun one to kind of compare and contrast, and it is kind of nice tonal shift because we've talked about this already, so it's not a spoiler. We have Hellbent coming up hot on the heels of Louisiana Longshot, and so having something a little bit to like to lighten the mood before we descend into the depths of hell. I'm very
Oh
excited
my
about this trip, and I
lord.
can't. I'm so excited. I'm dragging my friend Dana with me because if anyone was gonna do it, it was gonna be me.
Listen, Rachel's gonna use every opportunity she can. The fact that she about to drag me down this trail, y'all. Listen, I'm gonna be here for it. But yes, I would say that is so true. I think the fact that you have this opportunity to dissect the different types of people, the balance of people,
Mm-hmm.
the balance of being present, but also aiming to seed things that could be carried out in the future. Like there's
Yeah,
so many reasons in that context of why you want to even read a cozy mystery, and then when it's
mm-hmm.
done well, to be able to withhold information, to drip information, and like drag us along at the same time. It's a great read, and it's just almost like a master class when it's
Yeah.
done well.
Yeah, absolutely. And also getting to add like a serial style novel, because we have like a couple of those sprinkled in throughout our
Hmm.
2026 and 2027, or I'm sorry, 2025 and 2026 book picks. And those are always interesting to look at for exactly those reasons, because a lot of the picks we do are either standalone or part of like contained series versus this kind of serial style where it can kind of go like as long as you can make it keep going, you can. And a lot of
Hmm.
times like that is exactly what cozy mysteries do, is they do kind of tend toward the serial style. And so getting to
Exactly.
take a look at that and seeing how you sort of set up things that, like you said, you can revisit book after book after book, and things you can develop and explore, is always, it's a different dynamic than what you do with a self-contained series, and so that's always fun to look at.
Yeah. And another thing about this, which I don't think we've touched on at all, is the fact that this is clean.
Mm,
There are
yep.
no like steamy scenes,
Hmm.
even fade to, it's not even fade to black.
Yeah.
So I think that's another dynamic that is being introduced to the canon, books that we have. And so that's another great thing, while still, having the things that you love, and having the things, I guess, partly that I love because I picked it, but having it in one story. So great. And at first I was hesitant because I saw the cover and I was just like, okay, like, okay. But I mean, I
Yeah.
guess, it speaks to the audience, but I just was like, huh.
What
Because
am I
again,
looking
a
at?
client. Exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think overall though, because I think I'm looking at it now, this series has 30 books in it.
Holy moly, I did not realize it had that many.
It has 30. And if I'm not mistaken, she's still releasing in this series.
Oh,
So
girl,
yeah,
get it.
listen, that is a lot of books.
That is
And
a
a lot of
lot of
books about the
books.
same people. Oh my
Yes.
word. But yeah. It's like,
Also, may
that's
I
all.
just, I think it's hilarious to me to look at. So we've done this podcast now for 2 years, and we're coming up on like 2 complete years
Yeah.
for you to make the observation, oh, this is our first clean book. This is our first hint of a romance that doesn't have sex on the page. This is Dana's first ever pick that doesn't have chandelier swinging. This is
None.
fascinating. In 2 years, that's how long it took us to get into the archives of books that have no chandelier swinging.
Listen, I mean, I can get, and listen again. That's what. Listen, it wasn't my pick. I mean, it was my pick, but it was given to me. And I'm looking too. This, she released one as soon as it. The last one was in April, so she's
Wow.
still
Yep,
releasing.
she's going strong. Maybe it's gotten steamy since then. We don't know. It probably
No,
hasn't, but
no, because not for cozy.
not for
Not for
cozy. Not
cozy.
usually,
I don't.
but
I've never.
the people do love the steam.
Yeah, but I think even, and that's why when we say the ish on the Janet, I would say it sort of has the makings of it, but
Hmm.
hers is fade to black.
Yeah.
I always forget whether it's in book one, but hers is fade to black. So yeah,
Oh, it's
I
not
mean,
in book one. It must be in at least
in
one of
book
the later books.
maybe two or three, but yeah,
Yeah.
it eventually gets there.
Yeah.
So yeah, who knows?
All
Who knows what's
right.
coming? I think I may have some other stuff under, in my repertoire for 2027.
I'm
With,
excited. Yeah,
with no
we're
steam. With no
with
steam.
no steam. Oh my goodness. Well, you heard it here first, everybody. So you keep an eye on that book list. When we tell you what's on the book list, you go looking and see. Like, is it? Are we going to have any no steam in that year? We'll see. We'll see if that's where we land.
Don't get used to it. That's what Dana says. Don't get used to it.
You guys get to look forward to the fact that next year I have a steamy pick for our crossover. So that's gonna be an interesting experience for all of
Wait,
us.
is it your kind of steamy or my kind of steamy?
It's actually your kind of steamy. Like it is. So for the
Mm.
fantasy romance pick that I talked about, it is like
Yeah.
sex on the page. And I think it's going to make for a really interesting discussion of like what intimacy looks like on the page, because this is right, it's not romantic fantasy, it's fantasy romance. And I think that there's a little bit of, it feels like a slightly different kind of characterization of intimacy on the page. So I'm really looking forward to kind of having that that conversation, because it doesn't feel like it does in like in your romance picks, but it is still like sex on the page. It's super interesting. So anyway, before I derail, Dana's shaking her head. She is suspicious. Dana's like,
Girl, thank you that you read my face.
Oh yes. I've known you long enough to watch that look and be like, she is like,
oh Lord,
okay.
What have I signed myself up for? And that's what I was saying. But hey, it's always a good time to be had.
We'll see if you're still saying that next month.
Listen. I did say that kind of fast, but it's okay.
She signed up real quick. Well, but we're not there yet. So first we're going to talk about Broken Harbor. So let's go ahead and dive into our conversation and talk about our editor's takeaways. So to set us up for that conversation, Dana, would you give us that juicy summary? Tell us about how hot Cope Coulson is and all the things he makes you, Dana Pittman, personally feel.
Lies you tell. Don't have me in divorce court. That's right. Oh my gosh, here we go. Oh goodness. Since the moment our lives fell apart, the only thing that mattered was making a good life for my son, a life where he was happy and safe. I just never expected to find that safety with a hockey player known for his brutal dominance on the ice and his recklessness off it. But Cope Coulson is so much more. The gentle way he makes sure we're okay, the playful care he shows my son, the way he truly sees me. When my life comes apart yet again, it's Cope picking up the pieces. Now we're living in his house, eating his incredible chef-worthy meals, and it's not just my son who's falling, it's me. Because when Cope touches me, I lose all sense. I'm no longer thinking about staying safe. I'm thinking about how my skin ignites with every glance, how I come undone with the barest brush of his fingertips, and when we give into temptation, I'm lost. But Cope has secrets, and so do I. And when the forces from our past emerge from the shadows, there is nothing they won't do to end our happiness once and for all.
Let's go ahead and talk about what are some of the like high level takeaways that you want to kind of revisit in this episode to wrap up our discussion for the month.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that you will hear me say, and you've heard me say episode after episode, is how this is a great book, like across the board. And we'll talk more about that today, of just like a great book to see as a romantic suspense, but also to see the elements of romance at play. So that's just something in general that I just would love to reiterate as we sort of look at what the rest of this discussion will be about. Another thing that I want to lightly touch on is one of the things that we teach at Danger Tells is the braid, and that is looking at the internal, external, and the romantic threads of the story. And this is a great story to look at that braid from the beginning to the end of the story, of how it flows from beginning to end. Another thing that we talked about before, but I want to bring back again, which is talking about tropes here. Tropes as an engine and not just as a label. Because this, again, is a great story to see that. And if you've ever wrestled with that, or you wanted to be more intentional about your trope selection, this is a great one to help you see that play out on the page. And lastly, this is a great story to see the suspense without sacrificing the romance, especially being that it is on the page, it's life or death stakes, and we don't lose the romance. In fact, I mean, it really, it's parallel, it's dual, but it also sort of strengthens their bond for the romantic relationship. So those are the things that I have listed that I definitely want to make sure that we touch on.
Perfect. So I'm going to be sort of folding in also some of my kind of keynotes that I want to talk about. So I want to revisit this concept of really looking at your external story threads and utilizing those to best effect in your story and what they actually provide to your story, rather than just like arbitrary filler stuff, right? Because we don't need or want just filler junk, but we do want things that are going to meaningfully help develop the story. I also want to talk about developing specificity for your story and your characters. So back in the characters episode, right, we talked about flashbacks and memories and also relational dynamics and how specificity actually makes those things memorable. So I want to kind of talk a little more about that and highlight that point and that feature as something that was done really well in this particular story. And then lastly, I just want to revisit the importance of interpersonal conflict. I think especially when we have characters who are supposed to like each other, whether they are, whether they are romantically attached, or even if it's just, we have a group of friends, going on an adventure or whatever. Sometimes we shy away from interpersonal conflict because these are people who like each other. But life tells us that we have scuff with people, even people that we like, and that is actually a part of our like development as people. And so incorporating that in your story and not running away from that is something that I also want to make sure that we spend a little extra time talking about today. So to kind of kick off our discussion, since this is sort of like an overarching feature of the story, do you want to talk a little bit about this story as an example of the 4-act structure? And I mean, it might even fit kind of nicely with the story Braid that you were talking about. Do you want to kind of kick us off there?
This story, just in general, I just feel like it's a strong story to be able to look at romance in general from beginning to end, like how you're watching this couple go through the process of never having met each other before to being in this happily ever after, happy into the future stance. And one of the things that you learn when you work in the 4-act structure is how each one of those acts are sort of make up 25% of the story. And a lot of people, when you first hear about this, I think it's hard for them to wrap their head around, because a lot of times we hear about the 3-act structure. And so hearing about that, first of all, throws people off. But to me, I've always felt like it's such a natural progression, especially if you're a person that you're aiming to work on your pacing and pacing your story. Knowing that you have these 25% chunks is just helping you from the gate, right? It just helps you. So here, when we look at the fact that you have them go from their sort of status quo to going into the moment of them sort of getting to know each other and us understanding the stakes and everything that's going on, and them sort of resisting but slowly falling in love, to them sort of fighting love a little bit because their wounds sort of reveal themselves again, and then having sort of that climactic moment, and then going into them being prepared to fight for that love. We see those components play out really plainly. And the way that she writes it, I'm saying plainly, and I'm not saying that it's simple, but it's written in such a way that if you are a person that you're still trying to come to grips with what that looks like, you can use this story as a really great way to do it, whether you want to write romance or not, whether you want to write romance as a subplot, whether you want to have a romantic relationship, because the progression of romance is still necessary, even if you just have it as a subplot. This is a great way to see that momentum. Part of when I'm teaching this is helping my students and clients to understand that part of that is understanding that your characters have multiple goals when they progress through a story. That goal isn't, oh my God, I want to find this rich dude, have him marry me, and live happily ever after, right?
That
and
would
have
not
his
be a
babies.
very relatable protagonist. That sounds like the kind of protagonist that everyone would not like, right? That would be like, ugh.
Wait, why does my voice go up and your voice always goes down when we are being overly okay? Even though there are stories, and this, I'm actually reading one now where the beginning really is driven by the romantic relationship, but that's a harder story to tell, right? It's a harder story to tell. So here, so whenever I'm working with clients, I'm reminding them that, you want to look for the braid, is what we call it in Danger Tales, the internal, the external, and the romantic relationship, that there are goals that are connected to that. And at all times, as you move through the story, you want to be aware of that, right? Because whether you're looking at the trifill cycles, or you're looking at the progression of the stakes, or whether you're looking at the way that your characters are transforming, they're all sort of revolving around
Mm-hmm.
that braid. And this story again does a great job because we see the relationship between Sutton and Cope, whether you are thinking about Luca's sort of role in it or not. We see Sutton's relationship or um, situation when it comes to the external with her
Mm-hmm.
ex and the things that are sort of that sort of cloud that's hanging over her and Luca. And you also see the romantic relationship and in this case he represents all the things she's trying to stay far away from,
Yeah.
and that is also bumping up against that wound, right, that she sort of is wrestling with on her internal journey. And
Mm-hmm.
also I would say for her external journey, I would say of her aiming to build a stable life for herself and her son,
Yeah.
in the challenges that she's up against to be able
Mm-hmm.
to make that happen. And so we can see that, like, being able to call that out helps your brain to be able to track it, what it
Mm-hmm.
looks like in this chapter versus that chapter. How has it progressed? How has it changed? How has it regressed?
Mm-hmm.
And this is, again, one of those stories where I find that a lot of times, and I think this is the last thing that I have to say about those two things sort of combined. I find that a lot of times you will have writers that do such a great job of integrating two of those elements that it's hard to sever them. Now, on the sense of reading the story, that's a great thing, right?
Yeah.
Because it sort of bleeds together and they are connected, and it's a great thing. But if you're using the story to study, it can make it a
Mm-hmm.
little confusing because
Yeah.
it can make it seem like it doesn't exist, but it does,
Yeah.
right? It's that some of the beats you're getting double duty instead of it being isolated enough for you to be able to track. And
Yeah.
so in this story, I think the ability to track those is a lot clearer, which
Yeah.
helps it to also be another one of those great examples of looking for that, especially if you are hearing this for the first time. You know, you can always come to Danger Tales and check it out. But if you're hearing it for the first time and you're sort of wrapping your mind around what does it look like and how does that feel, this is a great story to be able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And this fits really nicely with this idea of kind of having those external threads for your story, right? Of what your
Mm-hmm.
protagonist is doing throughout the story in pursuit of goals. And again, we don't want those goals to be random or miscellaneous, but this is, what Sutton is doing when she's not involved, like when she's not just with, even when she's not with Cope, right? Just in the same scene, she is pursuing building this life, right? The romantic thread is key, right, to the life that she's building. But then when we see them, when particularly when they're not in the same scene, and because that's the one where, again, in some of our past picks, we've seen that it's like when our lovers aren't together, they don't have anything to do. But we
Yeah,
are
they're
watching
just
Sutton.
thinking about the other.
Yeah, exactly. They're like wandering around the city at night and like reflecting and like, okay, I guess. But Sutton, right? But that's also like what makes Sutton more likable, right? Because we see that girl hustling, right? She is trying to and it also is what keeps her from being, like a damsel in distress, right? Of like waiting for someone to swoop in and save her. She is actively working to build this business, to protect her son, to create that stable life. And what that also does is it helps you kind of pull in multiple sources of conflict, right? So the way
Mm-hmm.
that we talk about it in the academy, this is not, you always have a nice like clean name for frameworks and stuff like that. I'm not gonna lie, okay, we operate on some janky terminology over here. We call them conflict buckets, and it is
Come on.
exactly what it sounds like, where when you look at your story, you can sort of abstract your conflict into like categories, right? Your sources of antagonism, the places and sources of antagonism sometimes feels too vague versus, right, I mean, I don't know if buckets of conflict sounds less vague, but it's, again, we're abstracting where all is the conflict coming from in our story. And what it does is it allows us to, number one, make sure that what we set up in act 1 is actually relevant throughout acts 2, 3, and 4, so that we don't set something up that like goes nowhere. But then it's also a really great way to look at your conflict and say, what happens when these two things cross over, right? Like when they've got, two buckets dumping on them in one scene, or when you mix these buckets, right? What happens to the conflict when all of these things come into play. And that's so helpful because now all of a sudden your like your scenes have variety and also multiple layers, right? Of like, so that every scene then can kind of start to do double duty, where we are developing multiple things at once. And again, we're hitting our protagonist from multiple angles. And all of these things are progressing the plot as well as progressing that internal arc, because we're pushing them and forcing them to confront those things in the story. And those things are participating in their growth as a character. And so those are things that really, right, whether you're writing a romance or whether you're writing any kind of story, those are things that you want to be looking for in your story and that you can see at work in nice, almost, I want to say kind of like nice, clean lines in this story, because they're really nice and clear.
Yeah, and I would say the other part about this that's just the bonus, right? It's like the cherry on top is the fact that it really helps to keep from having plot holes, right?
Oh my gosh.
Being able to see, and especially if you are mapping it out or you're going back through and you're trying to ensure that you like everything is sort of pacing the way that you want or the way that you think it should or you've imagined, going back through and being able to sort of plot each of those lines or plot each one of those threads or identify each one of those braids, it makes it so that if you have any issues, it's almost like it's like blaring, like you can see it. And so
Yeah.
it on one hand it makes it very tangible to the reader, but then on the other side you're helping yourself as the writer by whether it's a bucket or a braid, where you
Yeah.
do one of them bees, okay? Do
Yeah.
one of them bees to make sure it's happening. And being in a story like this, being able to see it can help your mind wrap around the concept before it's time for you to implement it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then it's too like when you're writing or when you're revising, you kind of have it as like a reference point, right? Where you go back and you're like, oh, you know what would really add a little zest on this scene is if I pulled from this bucket, or this part of the braid is missing, right? And then you can kind of
Mm-hmm.
pull it back in and bring it in. And so it sort of becomes that simultaneous evaluative tool. It becomes a writing tool that you kind of keep in your back pocket, that editing tool. And it really, having that kind of clarity is going to go a long way at pretty much all stages of the
All stages.
process.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so this is kind of a nice also opportunity to maybe move into talking a little bit about the suspense, right? Without sacrificing the romance. Because this is one of the threads in our braid is the way that she brings in the suspense element. But that doesn't steal the show of the romance, right? But kind of challenges it. And it, again, we talked about this in, I think it was in plot, but where it's humming in the background and we're all like, this is fun. We're in a small town. It's cute. It's cozy. But where is that threat coming from? We don't know. And we're just kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we see, again, when we talked about in plot, we see sort of how we had that inciting wound and how the story sort of kicks off. And it basically places that cloud, if you will, over Sutton and Luca. And all the while, we keep seeing sort of pings of it throughout the story. You know, whether there are phone calls or there's instances, and it keeps sort of agitating, if you will, her wound. But as we're doing this, you still have this opportunity to watch how Sutton and Cope's relationship is evolving. And one of the things that you'll find is you'll find authors that sort of wrestle with this thing of, I want to write a romance, and then there's suspense. And because the suspense is much more tangible, right?
Yeah.
You having a suspense and having a killer out there or something to be solved or a threat to be thwarted is a lot more tangible than, how do I feel about the fact that I just picked the wrong guy and he just wrecked my life?
Yeah.
Right? How do you plot that? Right?
Right.
I don't know. I've never had, right? Then you get into all this stuff, and then leaning into the suspense just seems so much easier. But what happens nine times out of 10, when they get to the end of the story feels broken to them
Right.
because the suspense just railroaded their
Mm-hmm.
romance. Here, you again, when we said those, you said those clean lines, we can see that this romance is progressing, but we also see that that suspense never fully lets up, right? That
Mm-hmm.
it's always this white noise that's present, and until he's ready to so like totally reveal itself, it's not forgotten. And what she did in such a beautiful way is when it was time to bring it all together, she pulls both of them
Yeah.
into this moment in a way that was
Yep.
very relevant, where you're just like, oh, okay, right?
Yeah.
Like, in such a beautiful way. And so here, you get the suspense that is a real, true life or death
Mm-hmm.
suspense in this cozy small town found family, single mom, hot guy, and you're all in your feels. And it's like, wait a minute, like, we are reminded, right, that there's this thread out there, and it requires both of them to be the version of themselves that they need to be to solve it, which is all we want. And so we have that here, and then so you still get that warmth, the intimacy, the steaminess that
Mm-hmm.
comes from the romance, and then you also get this sort of relationship that cannot be severed from that central threat that the
Yeah.
suspense created, and you get both of them equally, not wrestling, playing right along, almost like a conspiracy against them. And we're
Yeah.
here for all of it. And again, this is one of those that, because it almost felt like, which something I think we might talk about today, had we not had the prologue,
Mm-hmm.
we that would have almost felt like a sucker punch
Yeah.
when we got to the end.
Yeah.
Or it could have even felt like it was not heavy handed, but a light brushing,
Mm-hmm.
so that when it did come up, you're like, wait a minute, wait, where'd that come from? Because we see
Yeah.
them, the bakery, the ring, the day, all of that.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, and so it wasn't all of a sudden with Sutton or coping. I think she picked some weird names, and I'm very corny with it. But the point is, you get both. And so this is a great story for that. And the last thing that I will say about it, which again, we talked about, I think it was in plot and a little bit in characters, is that you then have it going back to the extremes of life and death in a
Mm-hmm.
situation where you just have regular people. These are
Yep.
regular people. They're not law enforcement. They're not expecting to have to battle this, that, and the other, or the stakes that come their way. And
Mm-hmm.
it still feels very relevant and very real, and in some regards unexpected, in the best kind of way when it
Right.
happens.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, this goes back to so much to a conversation that we have all the time on the podcast because it is one of the most important facets of like telling a story and satisfying your audience, right? Is setting the right expectations. If
That's
she
right.
had not let us know, right, dropped that, because I think chapter one, right, she gives us a nice sense of the like the wound, right, and how it's impacting her, but by putting the prologue impacting her being Sutton, but by putting the prologue in there again, it's signaling something so important about like this is where the story's going. If you don't want that, this is not the book for you. But also that, again, to your point, it doesn't feel like all of a sudden we're like, what book am I in? Where did
Yeah.
what happened? Right. And feeling like there's a mismatch between the expectation and the payoff. And so she was really, really crystal clear about that so that it is satisfying, right? It's a good twist, not out of left field. And that is what we are always looking for.
Exactly. And again, this just does it in a way that, whether you want to write romance or romantic suspense, I think is would also be something that's very helpful if you decide you want to do a subplot, because, which I think we'll talk a little bit more about. There's nothing better than a story that has a subplot that is so nicely plotted that it
Mhm.
just all sort of melts together.
Yeah.
And part of that comes from it being seamless, right? Part of that comes from the fact that you have it so integrated and the progression is so smooth. It's almost
Mhm.
as if it's not beating along. It's
Yeah.
progressing with everything else nicely. So seeing it done nicely helps to sort of calibrate your mind to the fact that this is how it should feel. Now,
Yeah.
how do I recreate that feeling, if you will, in my
Mhm.
story?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And let's go ahead and just topically, I feel like shifting over into tropes is a great. This is sort of like one of the big things that was really important in this story is like her use of tropes, not as arbitrary, but as having meaningful impact on the story. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Hmm. And we will talk. I always got to remember if you're listening to this, you probably already heard it talking about the tropes, looking at it in a sense of not just with labels, but the fact that it is a part of the sort of the engine that moves this story along. And we see all the good ones, right? The fact that there's a single mom, the fact that there's a hockey player, you could even say billionaire, you could even say opposites attract. You could say found family. Like you could pull all of these tropes. And what she did is not just allow us to sort of dangle it out there, in a carrot or just make it as a label or just a characteristic, but bringing that in and allowing that to affect the trajectory of their relationship, of
Hmm.
the suspense, of the wound, right? The fact that Cope is a hockey player and the source of her greatest angst and hurt
Hmm.
came from this sport that he loves and that her son loves, and she's having to wrestle with that. I think what it does is I think it just helps you as a writer to just, if you really want it for the reason, like if you really want it, people are loving it. I don't think there's anything wrong with doing it. I think it's smart marketing in my book, but we can always talk about that another day. But if you know you really want it, go ahead, roll up your sleeves and make it count.
Yeah.
And really allow it to not just be in name, but also in deed,
Yeah.
so that it makes the story better.
Right.
And this is sort of like you get this one for free. And adjacent of that is that what it also does, I think what it helps you to do is to really bring your creative spin on something
Hmm.
that we are already very familiar with and we came here for it. People
Yeah.
were looking for hockey. They wanted
Hmm.
hockey. You got hockey, but you also got hockey when hockey gets a little bit rough and not just on the ice, and when hockey turns into something that someone is having to struggle because of their love or their desire to play professional hockey or whatever. And so were able to take that, and she's able to sort of put her spin and twist on it and allow it to sort of permeate the experience that we have as readers, while at the same time
Yeah.
delivering. And so I think this it should be, well, and I guess I should say a couple of others too. We have small town. We
Hmm.
totally get that. We get forced proximity, the fact that they're living together, but even the
Hmm.
fact that they're living together. It's not just, oh, here we go with the voices again. Let's live with the hot guy, you know? Um, it is something that she is fighting. She is
Hmm.
fighting to the nail because she wants no parts of this. And all the while, it is challenging her on all of those, the each thread and each bucket that we've talked about, right? It's
Hmm.
challenging her because it's slowly, the circumstances are forcing her to look at where she sort of has boxed herself in, where she's stunted her own growth, and where she let that situation change who she is.
Yeah.
And to get the love that she really wants, the life that she really wants to give her son, the life that she really wants to give him, something has got to change.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that this actually rolls really nicely into kind of talking about specificity a little bit because this really is just another facet of specificity, right? So one of the things that I have seen where sometimes like where certain romances don't land for people is because the tropes feel arbitrary, right? Where it feels like the writer is jamming in stuff that they know is popular without it feeling motivated by the story, without it feeling like it actually matters. And the opportunity that you have with tropes is to like push that extra, like push yourself that extra little bit, right, to say like, why does this matter to the story? How is this, part of the fabric of my characters or of my world, rather than something that I kind of plunked on top because I know that that's what the people are looking for. And this goes to like this kind of permeates all aspects of a story. So again, like a grumpy sunshine dynamic, you have such an opportunity to explore, what does grumpy look like for this specific character, what is driving them to be this way, and how is it that it, like, how does it actually shape their life, right, in a meaningful way, so that their behavior becomes uniquely their own. Because what happens when you do that for your grumpy, when you do that for your sunshine, now you have an original couple, right, with their own unique dynamic that feels true to the characters themselves. And this, we talked about it back in characters, but this applies across the board, right? This applies to family dynamics. This is about who are the very specific people that make up this family that create the very specific dynamic, so that it's not just like, this is my family and they're just weird, right, because I wanted some quirky side characters, but they become their own unit, right? And again, friendships are like this, and we talked about, like our friendship and the way that it looks so specific because we are super specific people, and when you put those two specific things in relationship, it has a very particular expression. And so really, when you're looking at your story, right, leaning into the opportunity to really dig down and like think more deeply about your characters. And I think that it's like, it can become a really fun exercise, right, to really understand your characters in a deep way and to kind of see them in different ways and different like literally like different environments, right, and to kind of see the different facets of your characters, so that again, whether it is your friendships or it's about the use of your tropes, you have something that feels like it is uniquely its own.
Yeah, I think all of that is true. The thing that sort of rose to the surface while I was listening to you talk, while I'm trying not to have resting bee face, is
resting bucket face, you say?
Yeah, buckets of resting face. One of the things that I point out to our students, especially the community members, when they pick up a story and then they see all these tropes just thrown on there and then they say, this isn't true, I have to remind them that everyone doesn't have access to the same information that you have. Mm-hmm. Right? Like they just decided to write a story and that's the best that they know how. Now you know different, you know better, mm-hmm. You do better. So part of this is like, this is how you get better as a writer, right? Yeah. This is how you get better. And this is how just having a simple framework and understanding helps you to sort of test and probe over and over again based on your stories, right? Mm-hmm. You can take that same trope. If you think about, there are some authors where every single story is an enemies to lovers, every single one. I mean, I've had clients that we're talking about this and we start talking about the tropes they want to work with. Well, I don't want to have the same tropes as someone else. Girl, please. Like, good luck. First of all, if you don't have none of them, that you are on the wrong side of this equation for a totally different reason. Okay. So there's that. But this is how you can have the same exact elements, but you develop a totally different dish. You can have the same ingredients and create something totally yours. You are asking for your lens, your perspective. What is it that's different about these characters? What makes them them? What is it about their wound that makes them have a different perspective of this thing that causes them to have their representative become grumpy? And it is this self-protection mechanism. Well, what is he protecting? What is he protecting it from? How does she get through that wall, right? It becomes this whole other thing that for me, I believe it just makes you fall in love with the fact that I get to do this. Yeah. But you can have on the flip side being very, very sort of haphazard with it or clumsy with it and be like, I'm just going to pick these things because hockey's popular. I'm just going to say they're hockey and move on. And here it just wasn't done that way. And I think it asks you to step it up, right? Step it up. Do a little extra work. Make it worth it. It's worth it for your reader, and it makes for an even better experience for you as a writer.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it just turns into like, right, you think of it as like, this is an opportunity, right? This is an opportunity to make my story, right, get a little more layered, to explore it a little more deeply, and to push a little more than you did with your last story, right? And to just continue that kind of growth trajectory. And I'll kind of like use this to sort of lead into the last thing that I just kind of want to mention, which is, and you're already kind of starting to like slide up right next to it, is not shying away from interpersonal conflict, right? So when we have characters who like each other, or who are supposed to be beginning to like each other, right, when they're in the enemies stage, we're like, well, you know, it's all conflict all the time, and that's fine. But then as they start to grow in their relationship, and once they're in some kind of relationship, even if it's, you know, whatever, temporary or however you kind of have it set up, there's an inclination, an impulse to shy away from conflict. So we talked in the plot episode about the breakup scene, but having your characters butt heads is, number one, believable, right? Like, it's important because that's what people do. But it's not a mark against their relationship if they're running into each other, right? Because conflict between your characters, again, especially between characters who like each other, it's easy. I don't want to say it's easy to have conflict between characters who don't like each other, because that is kind of underselling the work that goes into it. But, you know, it's one thing to have conflict with, you know, for example, the super snotty girl in this novel. I can't remember her name, but, you know, she's really uppity. She has it all together. And she's always looking down on Sutton because she's like, my kids don't get sugar. You know, she's kind of always got her uppity vibe. It's one thing to have conflict with that person, right? It is another thing entirely to have conflict with the people that you care about, because the people that you care about, right, so many of the things that drive them is their care for one another. And sometimes we get in our own way when we're in relationships. And so conflict between your characters who like each other is such an opportunity to ask your characters to confront their flaws, to confront their wounds. And it's a really great way to show change over time, right? Exactly. When they rub up against each other, when they bump into each other, and they have to navigate their own blind spots and their own flaws, and how their wound is motivating their behavior, putting them into positions where they have to actually navigate them gives you an opportunity to show over time the way that they are slowly getting better at handling these kinds of situations, or getting better at asking for help when they need it, or whatever that thing is. That is one of the ways that you can actually show your character changing, so that it doesn't feel like it did happen overnight, right? Where it's like all of a sudden after the breakup scene and they come back together and they're just like, I'm fixed. Like, if anybody has that experience where they're like, wow, all of my trauma, all of my relational baggage, I fixed it like that. Tell me your secret, because that has not been my experience in life. And it's not what we want in stories, because that's not what it feels like in real life, right? And so I think that, again, sometimes there's a temptation to shy away from interpersonal conflict, either because people are supposed to like each other, or because we've seen it done poorly and it puts us off. Don't fall for that trap. Do it well, and it'll be amazing.
Yeah, and the bad part about romance, it makes it feel like great sex all of a sudden cured you, right?
Yes. You're like, boy, that was easy. All I needed was a good lay. Okay.
But I will say, the one thing,
glad that's permanently on a recorded line.
Okay. Listen, who knew? Okay. The one thing that I kind of want to just sort of draw a picture, you know, as you hear that, it's the opportunity for your characters to confront their wounds in a safe space,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because you can confront your wounds at any point, which is what their lives have been like. But in a safe space means that they're gonna take a look at something because this is someone they care about and they don't want to hurt them, or someone can say something because they are in relationship that someone else can't say to them, and therefore it helps them to confront it in a different way. So the fact that you also get the opportunity to see the change on the page,
Mm-hmm.
it makes it so as a reading experience we get the opportunity to see for ourselves how they're changing and how they're thinking differently, and what are the things that they have to confront. The last thing that I'll say about this is the better you get at this, the better you are able to see how you don't do this as a writer,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
How you sort of, it's almost like magical. It's like that kind of magic where you were loose with the magic. So now all of a sudden it works on everything,
Yeah.
like it's like, so when you start thinking about this and being very kind with yourself, but also intentional, you begin to see, oh, wow, I did this a lot. Like I didn't even show. And it can be sometimes like you talked about in our, I think the characters, where you say it could be a sentence or two that
Mm-hmm.
can just fix this. But if you don't
Yeah.
know, then you don't have the opportunity. And then you miss out on a great, an opportunity to be very clear about your character's transition or their transformation. And so, yeah, I totally agree. And it's something that the more that you do it, the more that you sort of are leaning into that iron sharpening iron.
Yeah.
That's what you're seeing it at play, and
Mm-hmm.
it's doing it in a safe place. And there are times when it doesn't feel safe, and when it doesn't feel safe, even that causes
Yeah.
your character to confront, well, why not? It
Mm-hmm.
I feel safe in this situation, why do I
Yeah.
not feel safe in this, or whatever, I'm using that as an
Yeah.
example. So definitely, I totally agree.
Yeah. Awesome. So were there any other points, any last additions you wanted to make sure that we covered before we wrap our discussion of Broken Harbor?
I the final thing that I want to say, that I feel like it is something that I think we say often, and if we don't, now I'm saying it, is that as you're going through this process, what we're showing more than anything in my mind is how much we can learn from books that may not be our own picks. Like that
Mm-hmm.
we can see things just like what we're asking our characters to do. We're seeing it through a different perspective and a different lens. And when you see it, don't just unsee it. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Ask yourself, like, okay, so what did I see? What was necessary to make that happen? And
Yeah.
how can I do something similar? Especially if it's something like, ooh, I've never considered that before.
Yeah.
And I'm always telling students, is like, oh my gosh, I don't want to copy someone. No, you would never do that. If
Yeah.
you look at something and you learn from it and you generalize it, and then once you generalize it, think about, well, why is it that that hit me? And a lot of
Mm-hmm.
times that's when you go into your own personal bucket and you
Yeah.
uncover and pull out something that only you would have been able to uncover anyway. And
Yeah.
now you have a working example in this story, that you now have this little nugget of information, and you could begin to say, okay, now what did she do over here? How can
Mm-hmm.
I use that as inspiration? And what does that look like under these circumstances? It's not a small town, but we're in the city, and it's not a hockey player, but he's a boss or whatever, right?
Yeah.
I hope that what we're doing as we're looking at these stories, or even pointing out a story that you may not have ever thought, I'm going to look at this hockey romance. It's almost laughable to many people if you even say that, if they're not a romance reader. But looking at this hockey romance, to be able to say, oh, what does it look like to merge these two genres and make it work? What does it
Mm-hmm.
look like to sort of have something that feels like it's totally on either the circumference or an outlier to a small town cozy vibe,
Yeah.
to insert this drug addiction, mafia, blah, 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 right? All of this. And it works and it fits.
Yeah.
And when you have that, it gives you just one more working example of how to tell a really great story. And you have this opportunity to level up, right? To
Yeah.
level up. And so that wasn't specific to this, but it kind of is, because you may find that you end up buying this Broken Harbor not because you want to tell a romantic suspense, but you want to look at it for looking at subplots, or looking at it for character development, or look at it for bringing in a thread that you may pick something else that's totally left, but you want to make it feel like it's seamless. And now you have a working example of how that can look. And then you just have a different problem to solve. Well, then how do I do it in a way that only I can do it? So,
yeah, absolutely. That's so good. Awesome. Well, thank you everyone so much. This has been Broken Harbor by Catherine Cowles. Thank you guys so much for joining us for this conversation. We will be back next week to kick off our next book pick, which is Louisiana Longshot by Jana DeLeon. I will, before we get to that episode, I will be Googling her last name to make sure I pronounce it properly, but this is my best estimation. I'm going off of Dana's pronunciation earlier in the episode. So do look forward to that. So we'll see you back here next week, same time, same place. Until then, don't forget to like this. If you're watching us on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe. You can find us anywhere where you get your podcasts. Leave us a rating and review. That really, really helps us. And drop us a comment as well. Again, if you're on YouTube or on Substack as well, we can take comments. So let us know what you thought about this book. Let us know what questions you have. We've got bonus episodes throughout the year where we would be happy to answer specific questions. And I think that's everything. So we will see you guys back here next week. And until then, as always, happy writing.
Happy writing.